He's just demonstrated he doesn't care for, anybody's safety in this community.
Once seen as the embodiment of the American dream, Rick Harrison, for over a decade, represented the image of the middle class, steadily rising through relentless hard work, becoming a role model for those who believed that dedication and passion could lead to something extraordinary. Yet on a June morning inside a federal courtroom in Nevada, that image shattered in an instant when Rick Harrison stood before the bench and confessed to actions that stunned the entire nation: involvement in a transnational human trafficking network, money laundering, and even conspiring to commit murder in order to silence witnesses. No one could have imagined that behind those laughter-filled episodes beneath the seemingly harmless antique counter, there existed a dark basement, a place where children were held captive, where every dollar from illicit activities was cleaned before being funneled abroad. And the mastermind behind it all was none other than the man once trusted by all of America. A chilling question now lingers like a cold blade. How could Rick Harrison, a beloved television icon, fall from the heights of fame to the depths of criminality? And more importantly, how much of that so-called American success story was real, and how much of it was a carefully crafted performance that played out over many years? One from pawn shop owner to global celebrity. In 1989, in a dusty neighborhood of Las Vegas, Rick Harrison and his father Richard, Old Man Harrison, opened the gold and silver pawn shop with one single goal: to make enough money to get by each month. Coming from a working-class, military-rooted family, they had no significant advantages, no large capital, no media strategy, and no special connections. Rick had dropped out of school at just 10 years old and had already faced multiple failures with small business ventures before committing to pawnbroking, a trade often underestimated but filled with potential during the volatile American economy of the early 1990s. It didn't take long for Rick to show he was more than just a merchant. He was someone with deep expertise in the world of antiques. From Byzantine Empire, coins, and Civil War-era guns to first-edition Shakespeare prints, he could clearly explain the origin, cultural value, and market trends of each item. This knowledge gradually helped his shop gain recognition in the local collector community. Still, it wasn't until 2009 that Rick Harrison became known across America when Pawn Stars, a reality TV show produced by the History Channel, made its debut. The premise was simple: showcase fascinating shop transactions, mix in historical context, and capture the real-life interactions between family members. Unexpectedly, it became a massive hit. In its first season alone, Pawn Stars drew over 7 million viewers per episode, making it one of the most successful reality shows in the country. Rick became the heart of the series, a witty, sharp, and sometimes stern father who worked hard to protect the true value of every item and uphold the deeper meaning of life. People admired Rick not just for his vast knowledge, but because he stood for something familiar. An ordinary guy, modest and unpretentious, but clever and hardworking. Soon enough, Rick Harrison rose from being a small business owner to a nationally recognized figure. He signed deals with insurance companies, released his memoir License to Pawn, which became a New York Times bestseller, and opened second and third pawn shops. Las Vegas tours started listing gold and silver pawn as a pop culture destination. Rick appeared on talk shows at investment seminars and even launched his own show exploring the behind-the-scenes of Pawn Stars. He became a symbol of the American success story, the idea that anyone can make it if they're smart and stay true to their values. That image eventually turned into a kind of armor that shielded Rick from scrutiny, and because of that, America let its guard down. No one questioned him when he priced items that hadn't been authenticated. No one looked into his ties to elite antique collectors around the world. No one asked too many questions about where the items came from, because in most people's minds, Rick must know what he's doing. That trust, the very thing Rick had spent his entire career building, ended up cutting both ways, turning against him the moment the truth was uncovered from the dark basement of the empire he had built with his own hands. 2. Early signs of a dark empire. Before the federal court made public the explosive allegations, before the hidden basement cells were uncovered, and even before Rick Harrison stood before the court to admit to his wrongdoing, warning signs had quietly begun to emerge, scattered, isolated, and almost completely obscured by the glitzy spotlight of a hit television show. Antique dealers had long whispered about certain items that were too rare to realistically show up in a place like that. A few independent appraisers had also raised concerns about historical artifacts lacking proper documentation. But in the presence of TV cameras and the upbeat atmosphere that Pawn Stars had so carefully cultivated, no one wanted to be the one to disrupt the positive image Rick Harrison had worked so hard to build. Between 2015 and 2021, according to an internal investigation, the inventory management system at the gold and silver pawn shop was repeatedly tampered with in unauthorized ways. Several transactions, some valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, were omitted from tax records or falsely labeled as donations from a private collection as a means of exploiting legal loopholes. Rick Harrison was involved in nearly all of these dealings, but he participated under the title of art consultant, never signing any of the official documents himself, making his legal liability at the time much harder to pin down. Items like ancient Buddha statues stolen from Nepal, missing Renaissance-era altarpieces once housed in a church in southern Italy, and Greek coins that had never been legally circulated still appeared on television, enthusiastically introduced, with lines like, "A rare one-of-a-kind, priceless find." But questionable merchandise wasn't the only red flag. An unsettling series of events began to unfold around gold and silver pawn, although few initially thought they might be connected. In 2016, Brandon Lee, a former inventory employee who had made brief appearances in a few episodes of Pawn Stars, vanished shortly after quitting his job. His family reported him missing, but the case was quickly closed due to a lack of evidence indicating foul play. In 2018, Clara Morrison, an independent collector who had publicly criticized Pawn Stars for manipulating artifact market values, was involved in a mysterious car accident in Utah, but the incident was never thoroughly investigated. Then, in 2020, a freelance investigative journalist who ran the blog Pawn Lies sent an email claiming that Rick is more than just an antiques dealer. Less than a month later, his account disappeared and the blog vanished without a trace. On the surface, everything continued to run like a well-oiled entertainment machine, but within the FBI, internal flags had already begun to rise. A series of anonymous emails were sent to the Bureau's Southwest Regional Office, containing alarming statements such as, "The basement beneath the shop isn't just for storage," and "Something is buried under the floor, and it's not just cash." At first, these messages were dismissed as spam, until a logistics employee from the Pawn Stars production team, choosing to remain anonymous, stepped forward and agreed to share more detailed information. According to the provided information, Rick Harrison had built a separate passageway connecting his office at the pawn shop to an area not shown on the building's blueprints. This area is protected by a fingerprint lock system with access granted only to Rick and 2 senior staff members. Weekly packages are delivered to this area without going through the public camera system and without any shipping paperwork. What is particularly unusual, according to witness testimonies, is that no one is allowed to stay at the shop after 10 p.m., except for Rick. On those nights, a faint light is said to shine through the floor vents, something that would be structurally impossible if the area were merely a storage room. All of these clues prompted the FBI to place gold and silver pawn under special surveillance. A secret GPS system was attached to the vehicles frequently coming in and out of the shop, and the results showed at least 3 transfer points linked to the store, a warehouse on the outskirts of Henderson, an abandoned motel in northern Arizona, and an unmarked building in El Paso, Texas, all of which were suspected to be points for smuggling people and antiques across borders. At the same time, financial analysts discovered a series of cryptocurrency transactions worth over 5 million USD, withdrawn from digital wallets, linked to an IP address matching that of the gold and silver pawn's computer. These funds did not appear in the shop's financial reports, nor did they pass through any audit systems, raising suspicions that the pawn shop was not just a place for buying and selling goods, but also possibly a sophisticated money laundering operation, cleverly disguised under the appearance of a television show. When investigators first approached Rick at the end of 2022 to ask some questions, he appeared cooperative on the surface but avoided delving into details. At that time, the media was unaware of the situation. Everything was happening quietly, just as Rick had built his empire discreetly, carefully, and leaving no trace. However, that silence could not last forever. At the beginning of 2023, an anonymous call, this time from a child who had escaped captivity, opened the gates to the hell beneath the floor of the most famous pawn shop in the United States. From several ignored warning emails, a strange light shining through the vents, and a series of missing persons cases that were brushed aside, one of the largest cases in the history of American reality television officially began. 3. The Secret Investigation and the Basement of Hell. The official investigation began in March 2025, when the FBI received an urgent call from a teenager from Honduras who claimed to be a victim of a human trafficking organization and had just escaped from a dark cellar beneath an antique shop in Las Vegas. It sounded like something out of a movie, but his testimony matched the information the FBI had quietly gathered over the past year. After reviewing GPS data, satellite imagery, and international intelligence, the FBI confirmed that the last location the teenager was seen at was an area directly beneath Gold and Silver Pawn, the famous pawn shop owned by Rick Harrison. Immediately, the FBI launched an operation called Pawn Breaker. In the early hours of April 15th, while Las Vegas remained quiet under the glow of neon lights, a special forces team of 36 agents was deployed to surround the entire Gold and Silver Pawn area. The raid was swift but conducted with extreme caution. Although Rick Harrison was not present at the scene, the staff at the pawn shop were detained for questioning. When the Special Forces team opened the door to the basement, which had previously been thought to be an internal storage area, the scene inside left many veteran agents stunned. Under the dim light of industrial lamps, an underground complex was revealed. Not a warehouse, but a system of narrow cells, each barely 2 square meters in size, locked from the outside with no windows. Inside, 17 children were being held, most in a state of panic and severe malnutrition, many unable to speak or respond when rescued. Psychologists later confirmed that these children had been detained for a long period, some for over 6 months, and had suffered both psychological and physical torture. Furthermore, the basement area contained an office room with servers, 4 encrypted computers, and documents detailing transactions. A whiteboard hanging in the room had the scrawled phrase, "Delivery schedule, C package, MEX package, ZH package." Later, the FBI determined that these were codes for human deliveries from Southeast Asia, Mexico, and Switzerland, crucial links in an international human trafficking network. In addition, a smaller room, protected by a biometric fingerprint lock system, contains priceless antiques worth up to tens of millions of dollars. Ancient Buddha statues from Laos, missing religious paintings from a French church, medieval Quran manuscripts, and Roman coins that had never been publicly revealed. All of these items lack legitimate paperwork and are listed on UNESCO's Global Stolen Items Register. These valuables were hidden beneath the floor of a store that was once considered a model for reality TV shows. FBI officials described this discovery as a criminal museum buried underground. The internal surveillance system recorded over 200 entries and exits to the basement in the past 6 months, most of them occurring at night. At least 12 individuals were frequently seen using access cards and unidentified devices to enter. Notably, Rick Harrison was found to have been in the area at least 9 times with one of these occurrences, just days before the raid. One technician, when questioned, revealed that he had been assigned the task of checking the basement camera system every Wednesday night, a job he believed was routine maintenance. However, when the FBI showed him footage of the children who had been detained, he could no longer hold back his emotions. "I didn't think I was maintaining a prison." Financial analysis shows that the entire operation in the basement was funded by illicit money flows. Over $7 million had been transferred to offshore accounts over the past 3 years through transactions involving antiques and cryptocurrency. According to the documents, Rick Harrison is listed as the owner of at least 3 shell companies established in Panama, Belize, and Malta. These companies, on paper, operate in the field of art consulting, but they have no actual employees or offices. The FBI quickly coordinated with Interpol, Europol, and regional intelligence agencies to broaden the investigation. Rick Harrison's name, once a reality TV icon, is now officially on the list of individuals under investigation in a human trafficking and money laundering case that spans multiple countries, one of the largest cases in modern American history. While the entire United States was still reeling from this information, what unfolded next went beyond anyone's imagination. The seized documents not only exposed a global criminal network, but also revealed that Rick Harrison had been involved in orchestrating, covering up, and even masterminding actions to clean up the crime scene in order to conceal the evidence. And then, when cornered, he did not choose silence like many other celebrities. Instead, he stood in court, looked directly into the media cameras, and confessed everything. 4. The crimes unveiled. Rick Harrison's shocking confession in federal court not only marked a significant turning point in the case, but also opened the door to a series of horrifying revelations never before seen in American television history. Standing before the jury, Rick was no longer the image of a poised businessman or an inspiring father figure, but a defendant, with a cold expression, a steady voice, and each word he spoke cutting straight through the trust of millions of viewers. "I have deceived all of you," he began with those very words. "I am not just the host of Pawn Stars. I am also part of a system I could not escape, and I chose to stay." During the trial, the prosecutor presented an undeniable array of evidence showing that Rick Harrison was not merely a passive link, but the principal orchestrator of human trafficking, money laundering, and global antiquities smuggling. He wasn't just involved in the logistical organization, but directly managed financial transactions, selected partners, and planned the transportation of goods, including people, through the front of gold and silver pawn. A series of invoices extracted from a basement server listed items by code, and when cross-referenced with data from Interpol, these codes matched the initials of victims who had been confirmed missing. One of the most serious aspects of the case was Rick's use of an online auction system on the dark web to auction off special lots. Items that were sometimes unverifiable antiques, but could also include children, under the guise of lost cultural items. Rick and his accomplices created a secret auction platform for the ultra-wealthy, where the starting bid was never less than $200,000. Payments were made using Bitcoin or Ethereum funneled through cold wallets, and then laundered via company accounts in Belize and Malta. Documents seized from Rick's underground office also revealed details of expenditures for network protection. Over $1 million had been transferred to a number of key individuals within government agencies in various countries, including immigration officers, border control agents, and local officials in areas where the operation had been active. At least 7 people have been arrested for direct involvement in this activity, including a former leader of the International Art Goods Oversight Unit. Rick did not hide his role in the appraisal of antiques being smuggled into the U.S. He confessed, "I participated in the examination of dozens of ancient statues from Syria and Iraq. Many of these items had traces of being exploded or broken due to bombs, but the buyers didn't care, as long as they were rare antiques." This confirmed information from UNESCO that at least 22 artifacts once brought to gold and silver pawn were part of the list of lost artifacts from war zones, aside from transactions involving artifacts. The most shocking part of Rick's testimony was his admission that the pawn shop had once served as a transshipment station for an international child trafficking ring. Each shipment usually contained 5 to 8 children who were brought to the basement late at night by a vehicle specifically designed to transport film equipment. The children's names were coded in the records and assigned artifact codes, such as Venus, 02 Zeus Minor, or Mask Sumeria. The system was so sophisticated that, according to investigators, without a living witness and encrypted data from within it, would be impossible to distinguish between an antique transaction and a human trafficking transaction. Rick also revealed that he had previously shipped these special goods abroad through private flights using partners in the aviation industry, who are now under investigation. These flights did not appear on the Federal Aviation Administration's surveillance system and were disguised as high-end art transfers, stopping in countries like the UAE, Colombia, and Singapore. The final part of Rick's confession was the most devastating. "I once bought a girl for $100. She was from the Philippines. I don't know her real name. In the system, she was just special goods for." This statement left the courtroom in silence. Some jury members couldn't hold back their tears. Rick's lawyers tried to prevent the spread of this information to the press, but once the truth was made public, no one could ignore it. Rick Harrison, once regarded as the national history teacher, had peeled back that image layer by layer, detail by detail. And beneath that television mask, there was a completely different person, cold, calculating, and willing to sacrifice everything, even human lives, to protect the empire he had built. 5. The shocking confession. As the investigation into human trafficking and money laundering was reaching a critical point, a horrific event occurred that turned the entire case in a different direction. No longer simply a criminal economic network, but a deliberate murder plot to silence a key witness. The victim was Derek Quinn, a former employee of Gold and Silver Pawn, who had worked there from 2017 until early 2022. According to testimonies from witnesses and internal records, Derek was responsible for handling the underground payment system and had extensive knowledge of Rick Harrison's illicit financial activities. After being fired for violating company rules, Derek began seeking out lawyers and reaching out to the media to expose the irregularities he had witnessed. And just a week before he was set to file an official complaint, his body was found in a car at a parking lot near Henderson Airport, with a bullet shot directly to his temple. Initially, the case was considered a suicide. There were no signs of a struggle. The gun was found in the victim's right hand, and the car door was locked from the inside. However, it was the FBI, who were secretly monitoring Rick Harrison at the time, that discovered an anomaly in the autopsy report. The bullet wound did not align with the angle at which Derek would have shot himself, and there were no fingerprints from the victim on the gun. Additionally, a recording from a nearby surveillance camera captured an unusual noise around 3 a.m., the time the incident was believed to have occurred, along with footage of an unidentified figure approaching Derek's car before the camera system was disabled within 15 seconds. Based on the evidence gathered, the FBI shifted the direction of their investigation, concluding that this was a targeted murder, and began tracking down those with the strongest motive to silence Derek. All signs pointed to a familiar name, Rick Harrison. And indeed, just days after being interrogated, Rick, under pressure from his lawyer and irrefutable evidence, admitted to being the mastermind behind the plot. In his testimony in court, he coldly stated, "If he were alive, everything would fall apart. I couldn't let that happen." This statement, widely quoted by the media, became the evidence that marked the beginning of a new phase in the case, one in which the line between a businessman and a murderer was blurred. Derek Quinn's murder was not a spur-of-the-moment action, but a meticulously planned scheme. Rick admitted to hiring a professional hitman through an intermediary, someone who had been involved with criminal gangs in Mexico and had connections to a child trafficking network across the border. The entire cost of the operation, about $120,000, was paid using cryptocurrency and withdrawn from one of the cold wallets managed by Rick. The hitman was provided with detailed information on Derek's schedule habits and was instructed on how to stage the scene to resemble a suicide in order to avoid attention from local investigators. Furthermore, the FBI discovered an audio recording on Rick's phone, hidden in a secret folder which contained a call to an intermediary. In the conversation, Rick was heard saying, "If he opens his mouth, everything will be ruined. Handle it quickly, leave no traces." This statement, when played back in court, caused the entire courtroom to fall silent. The prosecutors not only considered this as evidence of a crime, but also as proof of the meticulous planning and cold-heartedness of someone who was once seen as a role model by the public. But that wasn't all. During the search of classified documents in the basement, The police uncovered at least 2 other murder plans that Rick had considered, one involving an antiques dealer who had threatened to expose a list of illegal goods, and the other a woman who had held a senior position in the company and was fired after knowing too much. Although neither of these incidents had occurred, everything related to them was clearly documented in files, including detailed plans, maps, schedules, and strategies for handling the media after the incidents. In court, Rick could not deny the evidence. Under the pressure of undeniable proof, he continued to admit to his actions of treating human beings as commodities. The confession that shocked the public was, "I once bought a girl for $100. She was from the Philippines. I don't know her real name. She was just Special Item 4 in the system." It sounded like something from a dark movie script, but it was a genuine confession recorded and broadcast live on national television, leaving millions of viewers in disbelief. This confession completely shattered the entire media strategy of Rick's legal team. No longer could they claim he was exploited or argue he had no knowledge of what was going on in the basement. But instead, a clear picture emerged of a man who had made offers, given orders, and planned to eliminate anyone who dared to speak out. From being a television icon, Rick Harrison had now become a leader of an organized crime syndicate, perhaps even more dangerous because for over a decade, he had concealed everything behind a facade of kindness. Lawyers have referred to this case as the Golden Case File. For all examples of organized crime, financial motives, a protective network involvement from multiple countries, and even murder to protect interests. The proposed sentence for Rick was anywhere from life imprisonment to the death penalty, and with his full confession, any chance of a reduced sentence had nearly disappeared. However, what lingered most after this part of the trial